Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. I do want to talk Ohio State, though. And what I would say very quickly with Ohio State is what I just said a minute ago. First of all, me being critical of Ohio State doesn't mean that they deserve to lose the game, they're overrated, they stink. That's not what I'm saying at all, okay? To be abundantly clear, not saying that, not saying they're not good, not saying they can't win a national championship. But when you come into the season ranked in the top 5, when you openly talk about it's national championship or bust, when you, to their credit, fought for this whole season because you believe you can win a national championship, we kind of got to pick you apart sometimes after a game like that because you're not being judged by what you do against Indiana. What you're being judged by is what you do against Indiana relative to how it will hold up against Clemson or Alabama or Florida or Notre Dame in the college football playoff. And so I think when I look at Ohio State, I would argue that maybe out of all the top 4 teams, if you include Notre Dame and Clemson and Alabama, I think they have kind of the biggest question mark out of all of them, and that's the defensive backfield. And I'll say I'm not really worried about the offense. I know it wasn't Justin Fields' best day, but I think, look, it was one of those deals where he's going up against a really good defense. He's going to have he's going to have bad days here and there. It's not reflective of him as a quarterback. I also thought the run game was awesome, as I mentioned a minute ago. 6 yards per carry, did whatever they wanted at the line of scrimmage. So I think the offense is where it needs to be. But I don't think it's unfair for an Ohio State fan to watch that game and be really worried about the defensive side of the ball, specifically the defensive backfield. And they were great in the run game defensively, held Indiana to a little old -1 rushing yard. But they also, as I said, Michael Penix threw for almost 500 yards passing on Saturday afternoon. And so I know people say, oh, it's just one game. Well, first of all, it's not one game. Penn State was able to move the ball through the air against Ohio State. Actually, Nebraska was kind of able to move the ball through the air against Ohio State, which is terrifying because Nebraska keeps switching quarterbacks. They can't get one quarterback figured out, let alone the 2 that they keep switching to try and figure out who's the best fit for what they do. So I think, first of all, it wasn't just Indiana. 2, I would also say the stats back it up. I don't think people would believe this if I told them, but Ohio State, if you can believe this, in pass defense, they actually rank, and this is crazy. I could not believe this when I see it, 115th out of 127 FBS teams. 115th out of 127. And I know part of that is because of the fact you just gave up 491 yards to Indiana. That's going to skew your numbers, especially when you only play 4 games as opposed to teams that have played 7, 8, 9 games at this point, right? I mean, if Clemson has one bad game, but they've already played 8 games, it looks a lot different than Ohio State having one bad game. I would also say I don't think it's totally shocking. This was the biggest question about Ohio State coming into the season was their secondary. They lost 3 starters, including Jeffrey Okudah, who was the number 3 pick in the draft to the Detroit Lions. Shout out to the Lions, who were just terrible, by the way. And Will Fuller, who was, Jordan Fuller, who was their safety and kind of their leader on defense. So it's not as though this was completely unexpected, but it doesn't change the fact that it is a problem. And it doesn't change the fact that when I look at the bigger picture of all this stuff, I do think like there's a little reason for Ohio State to be concerned. Because, again, it's not about what happened against Indiana. It's about what does it mean for when you have to play Clemson, you have to play Alabama, and you have to play Florida. And not only if you have to play those teams, but how they're trending. Like, I look at Alabama, and I'm not going to spend any time talking about Alabama, Kentucky, because it was an abomination. I watched a lot of that game because I know how many Kentucky fans listen to this show. But, you know, Alabama is not only undefeated, but I think you can legitimately make a case. They've basically gotten better every single week. Defense struggled early, got better against A&M, got better against Georgia, had some moments here and there, and now they're really rolling. And I thought what was most impressive about the Alabama game on Saturday was they were coming off 2 straight weeks of not playing. They hadn't played since Halloween, okay? As I said to lead the show, it's November 23rd. So they played on the 21st. They hadn't played since Halloween, which is just crazy to think about. But they're getting better. Mac Jones is awesome. Can you imagine Steve Sarkisian and what Mac Jones could potentially do against that Ohio State secondary? How about Trevor Lawrence? Not sure if you heard of him. That guy's pretty good. Well, guess who Ohio State could be facing in the first round of the playoff? Trevor Lawrence and Clemson again. So there's that. Kyle Trask is another one. Florida. I mean, imagine if Florida upsets Alabama and all of a sudden Ohio State has to play Florida in the playoff. Even Notre Dame, Ian Book, he's played really well. So I'm just bringing all this up to say I think this is a real problem, and I think it's something that has to get fixed in a hurry because, again, the standard is not Indiana. The standard isn't Michigan or Michigan State or Penn State. The standard is Clemson, Alabama, Notre Dame, etc., and I do think it's a big thing, and I'll just be curious to kind of watch it over the next couple weeks because I'm just curious to see how it goes. And I'm curious to see if Ohio State can get it figured out, and I'm curious to see if they can get it figured out in time for Alabama